Hi, it's Stephen here for Bland Designs, and this is CRAP number 22. CRAP stands for Creative Relaxation and Play, and this is where I experiment with products to see if I get something awesome or if I get something that's a piece of crap. And what I decided to do today, and this was inspired by a video I saw on, I think it was Nina Rabina, where she used Dylusions Paints 15 different ways. Now she did these in an art journal, and she did several different pages. But I got thinking, when I make collage papers, I often go overboard. I use every product I think that I have in my house to make the pages, and they turn out sometimes quite nice. Other times they turn into mud. So I thought I would just go with Delusions Paints and some of the methods that she showed, and maybe a few of my own, and fill this page up with color and design and texture. And when it dries, I can cut it into smaller bits and use it as collage papers. So I'm going to try to limit myself to one product only, and that's the Dylusions Paints. Now I have picked some weird colors here. I mean, I got a blue and I have a yellow and I have a white, and then I picked this one, the pomegranate seed it's called. And I've got some tools out. I got a paintbrush, I've got a palette knife, I've got one of these little brayers with the texture on them, and I have some textured rubber stamps. I think these ones came from Indigo Blue. And I've got a box of mark making tools here, which are basically toilet paper rolls and plastic cups and corks, things like that. And I got out some rubbing plates. Now you saw in CRAP video number 21 that I use these with texture paste, but these I'm just going to apply right into wet paint and see what happens. So that's basically what I'm going to use for this, and we'll see how this all works out. So let me get things set up here and get my desk cleared off a little bit so I have some room to work, and I'll be back. So I'm going to start this process by just laying down some color, and I'm going to do it with a combination of dry brushes and maybe wet brushes. And to start with, I'm just picking one of the colors at random here. I'll start with the blue. Grab a dry brush, dip it in the paint, and just brush. And I really don't have any kind of plan here whatsoever, because after all, this is collage paper. And the paper that I'm doing this on is actually newsprint, white newsprint. I could probably have done this on deli paper, but I want to do this on a fairly big sheet, and this is the biggest I had. I probably could have did it on a sheet of watercolor as well, except when it comes to using watercolor, when you're making collage papers, they tend to be a little on the thick side. So I thought newsprint might be a little better. A little bit more fragile, but we'll see. I mean, nothing ventured, nothing gained, and what do I have to worry about? It's just paper and it's just paint, that's it. Okay, let's put another color on. Let's go with the yellow. Again, I'm going to use my dry brush for this. I'm not putting a lot on my brush right now because, of course, blue and yellow do make green. And I don't mind a little bit of green peeking up through all of this. I have taken my paper and I have fastened it down to my table with a little bit of painter's tape just to hold it in place so it's not sliding all every which way. So my first layers of this, I'm just going to use my colors, and I'm just trying to get color down on here. And this is drying fairly quickly, and that's good because if it was wet, it would turn to mud. So I'm really just brushing it right out. So I have a fairly smooth layer, nothing too heavy. Okay, I've got a little pot of water off to the side that I'm throwing my brushes into. Rather than cleaning a brush each time, I'm using a new brush. Okay, let's try this one. This is the color I'm a little worried about because it's darker than the other ones I've used so far. It's kind of a pretty shade. Call it pomegranate something. Pomegranate seed. Just pomegranate seed. You can see I'm not using all that much paint. I'm really working this. Now you do want to be careful. I don't want to rip the paper. And I'm not making my brush strokes too even, and I'm just throwing a little color here and there. In some of the heavier areas, I'm kind of stippling the brush just to thin it out. Because again, this is just my first layer. And I think I'm going to add a little bit of white. Again, using the dry brush method. Just to lighten it up in some of these spots. Now, of course, this is Delusions paint, and it's water reactive. And I think it remains water reactive even once it dries. So we will have to keep that in mind. And probably when I get this whole sheet done, I may give it a light spray of a clear coating fixative, just to seal the deal. So when I go to use it in pieces on, say, a art journal page, and I'm using a wet medium like matte medium or something like that, it won't run. I can never remember whether or not Delusions, because it is acrylic paint. When acrylic paints dry, they're usually will not react to water again. But I'm not so sure about the properties of this particular paint of the Delusions brand. Just a little up here. I'm really scrubbing it. So this might be a good thing to use your not so in great a shape brushes for. Okay, stop. So that's my first layer, and I think what I'm going to do is going to hit it with the heat gun a little bit. It's pretty much dry to touch right now because I put the paint on so very thin and was scrubbing it. But I just want to make sure it's nice and dry for the next layer. Okay, so I'm going to finish drying this up, and I think I'm going to pick out some more Delusions paints and some other colors, maybe a few lighter colors for the next layer. So I'll be back. So for my next layer, I think I'm going to try using this brayer that has this bumpy textured roller on it. I pulled out some more colors of Dylusions paint, and I'm thinking I might try a little bit of the cherry pie. And for this, I think I need to put a little bit on. I've got a palette over here, a disposable palette. I'm just going to put a little paint on that. It's probably enough. And I'll show you how much I put on my palette. And I'm just going to get this kind of inky. Now I can tell right now that this is probably not going to roll very well, but let's just see. And I'm not really worried about getting a thorough coverage. Again, I'm just adding a layer of texture. Oh, fart. Yeah, there's a disaster. I turned this brayer upside down. It's got little feet on it. And look what I have done. Okay. Can we fix that? Yes, we can. We're going to grab a little masking tape. And we're not going to get too uptight about this, because after all, it's going to be ripped up anyways into other smaller pieces. And I'm just going to put a little masking tape there. Anyone know something? I'm thinking here, this may be a fortunate little accident. I'm going to put strips of masking tape in various areas on here, and this is just going to add another layer. I'm not too worried, the paint is still wet under there. And nobody's going to know that that was ripped, except you, and you're sworn to secrecy. Okay, and maybe one more piece up here. There we go. Okay, so let's grab our palette, and I'm going to put out another color. I'm going to get a little orange, and guess what I'm not going to do? I am not going to worry about the paint that's already on the palette. I'm just going to put a little bit more. Actually, waste not, want not. You see that this little wheel thing does not spin the best. We'll be a little bit more careful this time. I love making collage papers. I find it very relaxing because you're not really thinking too hard about it. I came in with this with only a very basic idea of what I want to try, and that was to stick to one product. Oh, I did it again. I gotta stop doing that. Don't flip the brayer. It's got these little feet on it. That's what's digging into my paper. So, alright, I'll fix that. Okay, enough of this. And, wonder what happens if I just... Oop, wrong way again. There's a little paint on here, so I'm just using it like a stand. Okay, now you're probably thinking, because I am, that this is a royal mess here. But I'm not worried about that. So let me put the brayer aside. And let's hit it with the heat gun, and I'm going to patch that hole that's up there. Just like I did with the one down here. And I think I've got another hole right here, and I do. So I'm going to patch a couple of holes. Just let this dry a bit. And then I'll come back and I think I'll do some stencil work. Okay, so I fixed up my holes and put a little paint on them. I just used my finger in the wet paint and dabbed it onto a few of those so it blends into the background. And now I've got a stencil. This is a brand new stencil I've gotten from Brutus Monroe. I haven't ever used it yet, so this is going to be its virgin run. And I'm going to use this color of Delusions paint this time, Fresh Lime. It's bright, it's almost neon-y, and I want something to pop here. And I'm just going to put this paint on using a sponge. I'm going to start up here. And again, now usually I spray the backs of my stencils with a little repositionable spray, but because this is a very thin paper that I'm using, I'm afraid it might pull up the paper again. So I'm just winging it. And I'm just trying to get texture anyway, so I'm not going to worry if a little bit of the paint goes underneath the stencil. And I'm using a cosmetic sponge, just a cheap one from the dollar store, because I don't save my cosmetic sponges after I use them, I throw them out. I mean, when you buy them at the dollar store, no biggie, eh? A package of what, 24 or something for $1.25? Not too bad at all. Now I am pouncing on the color because I don't want it to go too much under the stencil, but as I said, if a little bit does, it doesn't really matter. And I'm not putting on very thick, and I'm not concerned about having a really good total coverage on this, because this is just another layer. Now my paper, because I'm using a lot of wet mediums, is popping up a little bit, but that's why I secured it with the painter's tape to my desktop so it won't move too much. Okay, that's enough. Bye-bye, sponge. Get my garbage can over here. So I need to clean some of this paint off my stencil, so I have a wet cloth over here and a baby wipe. And I know I'm off camera at the moment, but I'm just taking off. I do not clean my stencils very thoroughly. So, unless of course they've got a paste like something, like a texture paste or a modeling paste on them, then you do want to clean them off fairly good, because once that dries, you'll never get it off. Okay, that looks good enough. So let's just give this a quickie dry. Since I put this on very thin, it'll dry very fast. Kind of watching it to see when the paint goes to more of a matte finish from a glossy finish. I know that it is at least dry, somewhat dry to the touch. And another couple of seconds should do it. There, I think we've got it. Okay, So I should put the lid back on my paint before I spill it, which, knowing me, that would not be an impossibility. Okay, so what do I want to do next? Well, I have got these texture plates, and I'm thinking of using them like a stamp. So I'm not sure but the best way to put the paint on this. I can either put it on with a brayer, or I could put it on with a makeup sponge. I think I'm going to use a brayer, and I think I'm going to use a little yellow this time. So I'm going to need my, see, I almost spilled it. I am such a klutz. There's no two ways about it. Grabbing my palette again, and you see I've got paint on here, and it's not completely dry, but I'm not going to worry about that. Just going to clean off my palette knife though, because I don't want to contaminate my paint. Let's put a little bit more here. And this time the brayer I'm using is just a regular flat brayer. Well, that's kind of pretty. I got the orange and the yellow. And we're just going to use it like a stamp. Ooh, that's kind of nifty. Oh yeah, I like that. Okay, let's do some more of that. Now I'm running out of space here on my desk. Get my paints up out of the way. Move this over here to the side. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I don't know if you can see it in the camera because it's subtle, but it's pretty cool. Okay. I've got more of these little texture plates. I have this one, has a little swirly thing, so I think I'll use that too. I think I'll hit this with the heat gun first for just a second. I'm not going to throw away this palette paper either when I'm done. I'm going to keep it. I'll let it dry, and it can become collage paper as well. There's very little waste when you do this kind of thing. Okay, so what color shall I use this time? I like the bright colors coming up to the surface. So I might use do I want to use this green? Actually, I'll try the blue, because the blue's getting a little hidden underneath that bottom layer. So again, I'm going to put a little of this out on my palette, clean off my palette knife. And I'm not going to bother cleaning off my brayer. This may turn into sort of a yellow. Or not a yellow, but a green, because there's yellow on the brayer already. Okay. Didn't get quite as much, but it's still adding some texture. Let's see, put a little bit more. And maybe just give it a little bit more. Okay. All right. So I think that's all I'm going to do with that layer. I'm going to let this dry. I'm going to hit it with the heat gun. I'm going to clean off my rubbing plates, and then I'm going to come back and maybe we'll do some rubber stamping. So for this layer, I'm going to do some rubber stamping, and I've got out 3 indigo blue rubber stamps. I love their stamps. Not sure which set these come from, but they're all textured. This is sort of a honeycomb. This is sort of a little small, I don't know what you'd call that. And this one's sort of like a ledger kind of thing with ink blots on it. I'm not sure how these are going to show up, but I'm going to start with this one. I didn't mount them on an acrylic plate. I'm not interested in that. I don't want perfection here. And I put some black Delusions paint on a fresh palette page because I took the other one off. It's drying off to the side because I didn't want to muddy up the colors of that one anymore, because I am going to use it as well. So I'm just going to get some paint on here, and I'm just going to lightly go over the rubber stamp. And the reason I'm using black is because my background is very busy now, and so I do want this to show up. And I think I'm going to move this over off to the side to ink it. And I got a little blobby there, but that's okay. You can see a little goes a long way. And you don't have to do the whole stamp. You can just take parts of it. Okay. Give this a clean off with a baby wipe, because you don't want your acrylic paint to dry on your rubber stamps, because that will kill them. And I know you can't see this. I'm doing it off camera because I don't have any room. And where's my cleaning cloth? I'm just getting the bulk of it off, and in a few minutes I'm going to take it and run it under a tap. But just so it doesn't dry on here while I'm doing the next layer. By the way, these cleaning cloths I'm using are not paper towels. They are actually a very thick type of fibrous paper, and these are reusable. They say you can put them in the washing machine and you can wash them out about 20 times. I have yet to put it in a washing machine. I just run them under the tap, and that's fine, but very economical. I think they cost about $8 a roll, and there's 20 of them in a roll. And I've only used about 4 of them so far, and I haven't thrown any of them away yet, and I've been using them over and over again. They come from a place called Lee Valley. It's a Canadian company based out of Ottawa, and you can go online and just look up Lee Valley and leevalley.ca, and they'll ship them to you. And their shipping prices are very reasonable, and all their prices are very reasonable. And they've got a lot of really neat things too. So it's a little aside here. It's a great website to go to. Okay, let's try this one. Again, I'm just going to use the black. Ooh, that one's kind of neat. Ooh, I like that stamp. I need to use that one more often. Okay, again, let's give it a little quick wipe. This is getting real mucky here. Okay, last stamp. Let's try it. That's kind of neat too. And you'll notice I'm just doing these at random. I'm not thinking about it. I'm just throwing it down. A little bit more on that one. Okay, so I'm going to clean off my rubber stamps, hit this with the heat gun, and then I'll be back. So for the last layer, I think I need a little bit of lightening up on here. So I've got out some mark making tools. I've got a little plastic shot glass, and I've got out a wine cork. And I've put a little white paint onto a clean palette, and I'm just going to dip the cup in it and make little circles all over this. So I'm just dipping it in the white paint. Just breaking up the space. And I'm trying to get a good distribution of these marks because we will be cutting this paper up when it comes time to use it. So I want every piece to have a little bit of every element that I've put on here. Okay. I'm going to just throw that out, and then I'm going to try the wine cork. Not thinking about it, just putting it down. Also, I'm using the little cork here, or the wine cork, just to break up some of the larger areas. Just clean off the cork over here on my mat. And now, how about a few little splatters? I always hesitate on splatters because they splatter and it gets messy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some paper towel and I'm just going to cover my keyboard because it's sitting over here on the side, and a couple of other areas. It'll just make cleanup a little bit easier. And I'm going to take that white palette again, and I'm over here on the side. I'm going to put a little bit more white paint on that. Now, I may have to spray this with a little bit of water just to get it a little soupy. I know you can't see that. I'll hold it over here. So I've got my white paint here. A little water. I'm a little low on my water. And I'm going to take out one of my paint brushes. Actually, I'm going to use a clean paintbrush. Let's see. I'll use a soft one. And I'm just going to, I'll bring this back over so you can see what I'm doing. I'm just mixing the water into this, getting it kind of soupy. I think I need more water. loading up my brush, and then take another brush. Nope, I think my paint is still not soupy enough. Want this very runny. Oh yeah, it's pretty soupy now. You can see why this is messy, because you have no control. And that's will probably do it. Yep. Okay. So there we have it. I don't think I'm going to do anything more to this, except that I'm going to dry this very thoroughly. I'm going to give it a spray of clear coat, some fixative spray, just to protect all of this, to make it waterproof. And then I think I'll cut it into maybe 4 sections that are roughly 8.5 by 11, 8 by 10, that kind of thing. So that'll make it easier for storing until the time comes when I want to use it, and for ripping up into little pieces. So once I've done all of that, I will show you the end result. I got thinking while I was drawing this that this needs one more touch. It needs a little bling. It needs a little bit of shimmer to it. So I mixed up some iridescent medium with a little bit of water. So this is clear. Looks milky, but it dries clear. And I'm just going to give it a light spurts and then let this dry. Okay, and I'm just going to let that dry like that, just to give it a little something extra. So now I have got everything dry, and I sprayed a clear workable fixative over the top of this just to protect this, as I said before, because if it comes in contact with another wet medium, it may run. So I cut it down into 4 pieces, approximately 8.5 by 11, maybe a little less, maybe a little bit more. And so you can see, here they are. And these I would just rip up to create a background in an art journal or on a canvas, and use matte medium to hold them down. So you can see you can have a lot of fun with one product making collage papers. You don't really have to use anything more than just simple paint. In this case, it was Delusions paint. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and stay tuned for others. Bye-bye.